So recently I watched a video about the ongoing tensions at the Polish border with Belarus. Learned a lot about things I never knew were going on, like Belarus purposely trying to flood Poland with migrants with the backing of Russia. See a lot of like escalation with Russia flying drones into Poland as well, which I understand were shot down by Poland as well. So a lot going on. It's quite a scary time. And go and watch this one. It's what if Russia invaded Poland in 2025? Again, just see this ongoing thing. It's like, for me, like I've watched a lot of videos about the Polish military and how it's been growing. But I thought like it's just to like have kind of like peace of mind and just hopefully as a deterrent. But it seems like Russia and Belarus are really like pushing the boundaries or trying to like provoke Poland, which is really crazy. Like, let's just check this out, see what this guy thinks.
Annihilate a Russian invasion. Russia's military is a shadow of its pre-2022 self. 3 years of grinding war in Ukraine have gutted its professional cadres, chewed through its stockpiles, and left it dependent on conscripts with months of training and tanks that should be rusting quietly in museums. Now, Russia still has manpower, still has industrial capacity, and still has nuclear weapons. But the fearsome army that once intimidated NATO is now little more than a bloody-nosed giant with brittle bones. Against that backdrop, the obvious question arises: if Russia ever tried its luck against Poland, how would it end? Well, the answer is simple. Poland would stop them cold. More than that, Poland would likely dismantle the invading force with ruthless efficiency. What Poland cannot do, and what no one should pretend is possible, is erase the Russian military as a whole. Moscow still has too much depth for that, but if the Kremlin is foolish enough to shove across the Bug River, the price will be measured in Russian brigades left burning on Polish soil. Hey friends, Wes here, military analyst, international relations degree, and law nerd. And Poland has been preparing for this fight for decades. Unlike some European allies who treated defense budgets like optional donations, Warsaw treated geography as destiny. The result is a military renaissance that is the envy of the alliance. Poland now spends roughly 4.7% of its GDP on defense, making it NATO's biggest spender relative to its economy. That money hasn't been...
Yeah, like, again, with that, do you, like, Polish people get, like, pissed by the lack of spending and investment by other European countries? You can look at the more Western European countries like France, Germany, Britain, all the other countries, like, who were really struggling to get to even that 2% of GDP spending, the target, or the amount that they had to spend on military, whereas you see like Poland really investing a lot and investing smartly. What do you think about that?
In NATO's biggest spender relative to its economy.
And do you feel like it shouldn't just be Poland having to have that burden? I know Poland's just taking its own responsibility because of its proximity to Russia and just not just waiting around for anybody else. It's really trying to strengthen its own military, but I feel like the other countries definitely have a responsibility to do that as well and not just leave it all to Poland to do.
That money hasn't been squandered. Warsaw has focused on exactly the capabilities required to stop Russian aggression: modern armor, long-range artillery, layered air defenses, and the ability to mobilize its population in a hurry. On the ground, Poland is assembling one of the most modern armored forces in Europe. M1A2 Abrams tanks from the US, K2 Black Panthers from South Korea, and upgraded Leopard 2s from Germany. These formed a heavy punch. These are supported, of course, by Rosomak infantry fighting vehicles, Krob self-propelled howitzers, and K9 Thunder artillery systems. In practical terms, that means Poland can match Russia tank for tank, and in most cases, with superior optics, fire control, and crew training. In the skies, Poland fields F-16s and is bringing in F-35s to fly alongside South Korean Fa-50 light fighters. These aren't symbolic purchases. They're part of a carefully layered system anchored by Patriot batteries, CAM and CAM-ER interceptors, and indigenous radar networks. This is an air defense architecture designed to chew up the very tools Russia relies on: ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and swarms of cheap drones. And beneath the headline systems, Poland has invested in depth. The Territorial Defense Force, a 40,000-strong volunteer reserve, provides local defense, ambush potential, and a stay-behind force in every region. Warsaw has also introduced voluntary military service programs to enlarge the pool of trained manpower. In short, Poland has layered its defenses from top to bottom, making invasion a nightmare at every echelon.
Yeah, it's it's very intelligently planned and invested. With the voluntary military service, I did see that mentioned on a previous video. Tell me if you did that, know anyone who took part in that. How was it structured? What was it like? I think anything like that is a good thing. I think that's good for every country to have as well, like for people who want it. Really good skills to learn in case the worst happens, or just to develop people in general.
To understand the imbalance, you have to look at what's left of the Russian military. The war in Ukraine has inflicted catastrophic damage. By Western estimates, Russia has suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties. Its tank fleet is a rolling museum, with T-62s and even T-55s pressed back into service. Modern platforms like the T-90M exist, but in too small a number to offset the losses. Artillery, long considered Russia's hammer, has also been degraded. Ammunition shortages, counter-battery duels, and drone-directed precision strikes have bled Russian firepower. Where Russia once overwhelmed enemies with sheer volume, it now struggles to maintain tempo without imports from North Korea. The manpower problem is no better. Moscow can mobilize, yes, but mobilization fills the ranks with half-trained conscripts. The professional young officer corps that once gave units backbone has been gutted. They also have no NCO corps, or non-commissioned officers, at least as we think about them in the West. What remains is a patchwork of exhausted veterans, fresh recruits, and convicts pressed into service. This isn't the Red Army of legend. It's a battlefield host that can still hurt, still grind, and still throw numbers at a problem, but when faced with a modern, motivated, NATO-backed opponent, its weaknesses are glaring. Okay, the opening salvo, missiles, drones, and a Polish shield. Any Russian invasion of Poland would begin in the air. Missiles and drones would streak across the border in an attempt to blind radars, shred command nodes, and terrify civilians. But Poland has already been rehearsing for this. Russian drones launched against Ukraine have strayed into Polish airspace and been shot down by Polish or Allied interceptors. These aren't hypotheticals, they're dry runs. Against mass strikes, Poland's Patriot batteries, CAM interceptors, and F-16 squadrons would go to work. NATO's integrated air defense network would reinforce them, pooling surveillance and interception. Across the alliance, Poland would not be caught off guard. Its skies would be contested from the start, and the attrition of Russian missiles would be rapid. But what about the ground fight? Ambushes, fortifications, and counterblows? Well, if Russian ground forces pushed into Poland, they would run headlong into a wall. Warsaw is building the Eastern Shield, a 700-kilometer belt of fortifications, barriers, sensors, and obstacles along its frontier. Even unfinished, it shapes the battle space, forcing Russian columns down predictable routes where artillery can pre-register fire missions. Once inside, the Territorial Defense Force would spring into action, local fighters ambushing convoys, sabotaging bridges, and holding choke points. Behind them, regular brigades would maneuver. This is where the modern armored corps comes into play. Polish Abrams and Leopards would not sit in the trenches, they would counterattack, exploiting stalled spearheads and hammering exposed flanks. The artillery duel would be equally punishing. Poland's Krat howitzers and HIMARS launchers, backed by NATO reconnaissance, could strike Russian artillery parks, ammo depots, and logistics hubs. Kaliningrad and Belarus, the natural springboards for invasion, would become high-value targets. And with NATO's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance overhead, Russia would find it impossible to hide its logistics. Okay, we can't talk about Russia invading Poland without NATO's Article 5, the force multiplier. The force multiplier. Now, let me be clear. I believe Poland could halt a Russian invasion without any other assistance from NATO. Yeah, but the moment a Russian soldier crosses into Poland, the war ceases to be bilateral. Article 5 of the NATO treaty is triggered and the alliance is at war. That changes everything. Unlike Ukraine, which has had to fight and barter for munitions, Poland would fight with the full weight of NATO at its back.
Yeah, that's the point. That's what makes it so surprising what's going on with these escalations. Like fine if Russia thinks they have this like misplaced confidence that they could actually do damage to Poland, but like as I said, as soon as they start anything that's full of NATO, like that's just a death wish. Like what's the end goal here? Like they can does Russia have that confidence they can beat the whole of NATO? It seems like very misplaced that confidence, or yeah, what's the reason? What do you think the reason for this is, or yeah, again, what's the end goal?
American, British, French, German aircraft would flood the skies. Logistics corridors from Germany and the Baltic would open instantly. NATO cyber and space assets would pour data into Polish targeting systems. Russia, meanwhile, would face the same problems it faces in Ukraine, only worse. Its supply lines through Belarus and Kaliningrad would be stretched thin and under constant attack. Its air force, already bloodied in Ukraine, would now face NATO's premier fighter fleets. The imbalance would be so severe that the Kremlin would have only two options: retreat or escalate dangerously. So here's where we reach the heart of the matter. Could Poland destroy the Russian military? The answer depends on scope. Regionally, yes. Any Russian force package, brigades, armies, even multi-army groupings sent into Poland would be destroyed. Polish defenses, combined with NATO support, would smash them to bits. Strategically, no. Russia, as a state, retains millions of potential recruits, a still functioning defense industry, and most importantly, nuclear weapons. The Russian military could absorb another disaster, regenerate over time, and remain a threat. Poland can defeat Russia in Poland. It cannot annihilate Russia's armed forces across the entirety of Eurasia. But what can history teach us? Well, history is littered with examples of armies underestimating smaller but better prepared opponents. In 1939, Poland was steamrolled not because it lacked courage, but because it was assaulted from both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, without Allied intervention, I might add. In 2025, that script cannot be repeated. Poland is not alone, and Russia is not the Soviet Union. A more fitting analogy is 1939 Finland, small, outnumbered, but prepared and motivated. The Finns inflicted staggering losses on the Red Army. Now, scale that up. Poland is bigger, richer, better armed, and backed by the world's most powerful alliance. Russia would find itself reliving the Winter War, only this time with NATO supplying the Molotov cocktails. The bottom line is that Poland has spent the last 2 decades transforming itself into NATO's fortress on the eastern frontier. With modern armor, deep strike artillery, layered air defenses, fortified borders, and a mobilized population. It's one of the few nations in Europe that could plausibly fight Russia by itself head-on and win. Russia, by contrast, has bled itself white in Ukraine. Its vaunted army is now a patchwork of conscripts, convicts, and creaky hardware. Russia remains dangerous. Large armies always are. Let's not underestimate our adversaries. But it's brittle in ways that Poland and NATO were built to exploit. If the Kremlin is reckless enough to test Poland, the outcome would be swift and brutal. Russian columns broken in border kill zones, Polish armor surging into counterattack, and NATO aircraft filling the skies. Russia's army would not be destroyed in its entirety, but it would suffer another devastating defeat. And in Warsaw, the message will be clear. This time, the Poles are ready. That's it for today, friends. Subscribing is the...
Oh, yeah, I guess that gives a bit more confidence. Again, like I watched like videos like this over the last couple months, 6 months, 1 year, and the situation does seem to be escalating rather than de-escalating. But yeah, just hopefully it doesn't get to any point where anything like this has to happen. So tell me what you think. I always ask for people's opinions, and I think it's still fair to ask just because the situation is always changing. So yeah, just tell me how you feel, what you think is going to happen in the future. Thanks.